First reader says, can you please talk about why people on disability and trust fund babies are the way they are? Is it that they are crippled? Is it that they're lazy, or what? But I think the real question, of course, is about people who are financially supported, who receive income without working for it, whether it be a trust fund or disability or whatever it is. And of course, there are people who actually need to be financially supported. There simply is no other way for them. I had a good friend who died not long ago who was a quadriplegic, and he needed considerable financial support. People who are very old, those who are genuinely sick, I know lots of these. So my comment, the comments that I make are not about them. So that saves me usually from getting several emails from people who say, I know somebody who really needs financial aid. Yeah, me too. But I also know more than my fair share of people who receive financial support who could work and choose not to. One day I asked a teenage pothead what he wanted to be when he got to be older. And he said, didn't even blink, no hesitation. He said, on disability. And he wasn't kidding. He knows so many people who have manipulated the social services system that he figures that if he can just get on disability, like, many of his friends and many of his friends' parents, then he won't have to work the rest of his life, and he can just sit around and he can watch TV and play with his friends and smoke pot. As a physician, and since, I've seen a great number of people whose primary goal in life is to achieve disability. They don't want to get better. So guess what? They don't. If you don't want to, you can find reasons to stay disabled. I have had many surgeries. I can understand easily how people would find pains or exaggerate pains and continue to complain in a way that they eventually become disabled. They often have illnesses, in fact, that are very difficult to verify. Chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, back pain. And again, I am not saying that there are none of those people who occasionally merit disability. So why would somebody want to be disabled? Because if they weren't, they'd have to work. Work isn't just about the effort. When you work, you have to be responsible. You have to obey the commands of other people. Many people hate that. They hate to be told what to do. In order to apply for a job, applying for jobs is a rejection festival. I can remember when I went to publish my first book, I was rejected by 134 literary agents in a row. Applying for a job is a very similar thing. Some people have applied for hundreds of jobs. In order to get work, you have to be willing to be rejected. When you have a job, you have to be willing to be criticized and taught and often controlled. So there are a whole lot of things about work that are distasteful to people. It involves the things we fear and hate most. So why not just avoid it all and play? And if you're disabled, you get to play legitimately and get sympathy and be supported, and nobody can say anything to you. The problem is that work makes us happy and strong. No kidding. That was our family motto for a reason, and it wasn't just to get the kids to work. People who work, this has been demonstrated in multiple studies, people who work are happier because they're contributing, because they're fulfilling their talents. They're using their abilities. They're interconnecting with people. They're improving their skills. Their work gives you... One lady complained to me bitterly when I told her, you got to get a job. Oh, I can't get a job. I'm socially disabled. I said, well, I don't care. You got to get a job. If you want me to help you, you got to get a job. So she got a job. She says, I've had to learn more things because of my job. I've had to learn to take risks. I've had to learn to be told what to do. I've had to learn to take on projects where I didn't know what I was doing. I have had to learn confidence. I've had to learn communication, all from the job. Work makes us happy and strong. And the other thing is that almost none of those people who are on disability then use their abundance of time and energy to ever help another person. I don't think I can count on one hand the number of people I've seen who are physically disabled who, for example, invite other people, blind people, over so they can read to them. Invite people over to teach them something. Offer a literary class for free. No, they do it just to do nothing. Now, is that lazy? Yeah, but rather than call it lazy, I'd prefer to call it what it is. It's really a sense of hopelessness in the face of a lifetime of nothing ever producing happiness. In other words, I understand why they do it. Nothing they've ever done has made them happy, so they're going, why work? And then there are all those risks that we talked about. So no criticism of the people who do this. It's just a reflection of a lifetime of pain. It's easy to understand, but it's a terrible way to live. Here's somebody who says, I don't think you talk enough about masturbation. When I read that, I thought, I don't think anybody's ever said that to me before. Greg, you just don't talk enough about this subject. Would you mind talking about it on the video chat? Sure. Masturbation in kids, should it be discouraged? Both of my kids started touching themselves as early as 4 years old. And the way I've handled it was to not make a big deal about it, because that's what books usually say. I've talked about keeping it in private, but I've also talked to them about why they shouldn't be doing it often. Is this the right approach? What else should I say? What about when you're single? Should we avoid it altogether? Or is it okay once in a while, like once or twice a month? Is it okay and healthy, assuming no porn use? And when you're in a marriage, I remember you saying it detracts from the relationship. That's it. So like in a marriage, no masturbation at all? What if you're separated for an extended period of time? That's a lot of different questions. If you attempt to put a frequency number on masturbation, once a day, once a week, once a whatever, it's completely artificial and it's not going to work anyway. So let's talk about whether it's healthy at all. An addiction is anything that causes you any kind of emotional harm or prevents emotional growth or interferes with relationships and which you can't easily quit. Masturbation qualifies in every regard, especially when porn is involved. How so? It becomes a habit. I get to interview people intimately about their lives every day. And once people start down this road, they don't usually just do it once a year or once a month. It becomes quite a habit. In fact, with many people, especially guys, but some women also, it's an everyday habit. So why is that a problem? Well, in fact, why is it a problem if it were once a week? Because once people find a way of relieving pain that doesn't address the real cause of the pain, now they're stuck. It's just pain relief. You don't address the cause, and so the cause stays there, and now you're going to continue to relieve your pain, and you're going to tend to relieve it more often, and if that doesn't work, you're going to go to something else. So pain relief never works, not for long, whereas pain elimination, eliminating the cause, that's what we're looking for. Another way of saying much of what I've been saying so far is what's referred to in theatrical or literary terms as deus ex machina, God in the machine. In the theaters of Shakespeare, for example, they'd get into these in Shakespeare's time, they would get into these really complicated dramas, and everything would build, the conflict would build, and there would appear to be no solution at all. And something would come out of the blue, very often descend from offstage on wires, God in a machine carry off the hero and save the day when it appeared that there was absolutely no way out of this problem. The Greek gods were really famous for doing this. In other words, these devices solved things artificially. And that's what masturbation does. Solves our tension, but it's artificially. It affects what we think about. What we do affects what we think about, affects our thoughts. It affects our relationships. Eventually, I can't even count how many men have said this to me. Yeah, I masturbate regularly, but do you have sex with your partner? And they go, and this is almost an exact quote in most cases, why bother? In order to have sex with my wife, I actually have to have a relationship with her. I actually have to be nice to her first. And it's really annoying. They're not joking when they say this. Whereas if you have sex with yourself, you don't need to be nice to anybody, including yourself. What about in kids? Same reasoning. Singles, same. Marriage, same. It's the artificial relief of pain. What if you've been married and you're separated for a long time? For example, a woman talked to me whose husband was in Afghanistan for a year. She said, what do we do? We both have these sexual urges. We're married and he's in Afghanistan. It's masturbation when it's just you. When your partner is not involved, you have to decide for yourself. I'm not going to solve this moral dilemma for you. If having phone sex with your partner is sex or masturbation, you figure it out. Does it matter if your partner is in the room or not, as long as you're having sex together? So, pretty sure we've answered all of your questions. If you have more about that, then in contrary to what you said in the beginning, I'd just be happy to talk more about this subject. Here's a man who wrote and said, I've been unhappy all my life. I've dreaded going to work because the people there can be so demanding and critical, but I finally have the peace I needed, real love, that lets me produce happiness whenever I want it, wherever I go. He has lots of drowning people at work, but now he says, I don't really mind. He said, quote, somebody helped me the other day with another thought that made a big difference. They said they always have a choice about how they feel, even if, and he emphasized those two words, even if the other person spits in my face. And he said that was a big revelation to him. His feelings are not dependent on what other people do, no matter what they do. That's the key, isn't it? It's easy to stay peaceful if other people do what we want. There's no great trick to that. If you want to know what a person is really like, push them a little bit. I had a good friend once who said, I don't think people are as angry or as easily disturbed as you think. This was many years ago. I can't imagine doing this now, but I just reached up and slapped him on his cheek. It's a good thing I knew him well. And he immediately became angry, and I said, proved my point. We're either angry or we're right at the verge of being angry, and it doesn't take much to push us over. If you want to know, in a similar vein, what you are like, get slapped by circumstances or people or injustice or, whatever. A man writes, I'm feeling some guilt about writing this to you now, as I'm supposed to be at work. Somehow. Now, keep in mind, I know this man very well. So it may sound like I'm offering unusually specific answers to him, and that's because I do know him well. You and guilt just don't go together. You're too delightful a person. You are such a delight to be around. You enjoy life so much. You're such a naturally good person that for you to stay with guilt for more than a few minutes just doesn't even make any sense. It's not like you're an overall slacker when you say you're writing a letter at work. You do more work than most two people. Lose the guilt. He continues, I've decided that I will write down today as a day off, as I really want to write this letter. What a fun day off, at least for me. He said, I've been pretty unwell with a stomach complaint, and so I spent most of my days off just reading. I read The Secret Garden. Again, those of you who haven't read The Secret Garden, I strongly suggest it. And Little Lord Fauntleroy. Most people in the United States have never heard of this book. It was also turned into a movie. Both of these are among my favorite literary creations ever. Odd that I can find almost nobody who even knows about the second. And to have not read The Lord Fauntleroy is not to know how to read. It's to be culturally bereft. He continues, I have always known that I was pretty selfish, although like Hugh Grant in About a Boy, I felt, to quote the movie, how can I be selfish? There's only me that I'm responsible for because he doesn't have a wife or children. And I didn't really believe that I was any more selfish than anyone else, which is probably true. He said, I had such fine examples to tell of my father being a priest and being selfless, quote, but with always selfish motives, or my brother, who is a husband and father, and in my opinion, being spectacularly selfish while being both of those things. So I figured, compared to everybody else I knew, I wasn't a particularly selfish person. And with great conceit, I also felt that I was kinder, gentler, and more sensitive than a lot of people. Well, the truth is, your spirit is one of the most gentle and sensitive ever that I've known. Love your spirit, even with the occasional selfishness, which we all have as a result of a lifetime of pain. He continues, I also thought I was quite brave, and I'm just beginning to realize how enormously selfish and self-centered I am, and it's coming as a bit of a shock. Well, sure, some of you are selfish. Look at how you were raised. Like you said, you were raised with a father who pretended to be selfless as a priest, but was not. By many other people in your family, and I know some of these people whose concern is only themselves. So selfishness was the standard in your family. In fact, the gold standard. But you're seeing the times that you're selfish, which most people are not ever willing to entertain as a possibility. Seeing our selfishness sets us apart from the people who are selfish and will never change because they won't admit it. You continue, as I read about Lord Fauntleroy, his loving mother, the old Earl. Those of you who haven't read this book, you have to read the book just to understand these references and how cool they are. The dry old lawyer, Mr. Havisham, the ponderous, kind Mr. Hobbs, Dick the bootblack, in all of them, I saw me. How beautiful, because we all share so many similar characteristics. He continues, it seems like I used to be very like Lord Fauntleroy when I was younger. My mother has told me little things that I used to say and how merry and happy I used to be and how caring I was about animals and people in distress. In fact, people called me Appy, short for happy, although it's not a whole lot shorter, is it? Because I would just lie and laugh with delight all the time, which doesn't frankly surprise me. I can see that little boy with no effort in you at all after all these decades. You continue. I remember I always cried when I shot something, which I would sometimes do to please my father, the hunter, and I wanted to care for orphaned animals and the sheep and be a farmer. And what I see is that as my life has gone on, I have trusted life and God less and less and looked after myself more and more. A very natural tendency for people to do. Can't count how many people have said, well, yeah, I'm a little self-centered, but, you know, with time, I'm sure that'll improve. Oh, no, with time, selfishness worsens because the pain worsens. Because now, in addition to pain, the loneliness builds, and then the guilt, and then the shame, and then the worthlessness, and then eventually there's no way out. You conclude, I've become more and more like the dry old lawyer who actually I really liked in the book, and the selfish, cynical Earl. And I can see that I was heading for a very lonely end to my life if it hadn't been for God putting some real love people in my way who have transformed the way I see and feel. Ain't life grand? It's beautiful to hear anybody just muse, in this man's case, to wax lyrical. He actually, no kidding, in person talks like this. To hear somebody articulate a genuine change of heart. It's a rare thing to see, and to find somebody who can actually put it into beautiful words is lovely. Here are a couple of Zoe references. I went back and discovered I've left some out, so I forget how old these kids are. I think Zoe's almost 2, but this is when she was 14 months old. So she's a 1-year-old, and her mother says she has a compulsive desire to share with people. And I really believe we have an innate desire to love, to share, and then it's beaten out of us. Her mom continues, she can't even talk yet, and we've made no attempt to teach her anything about sharing at all. But anytime she has food, she starts hand-feeding the kids around her, even if she's hungry. She never gets bothered when other children take her toys. If she really wants a toy back, she'll follow the kid around, pointing to the toy and looking at me. Those of you who have 1-year-old children know that that would not be the usual response from most 1-year-olds. The other story. She has a fantastic sense of humor. Oliver and I tease her a lot. We take things from her. We imitate her when she cries. And unless she's having a really bad day, she just thinks it's hysterical and usually just stops crying. I've started to have the most bizarre feeling. And so she stops crying most of the time. I'd forgotten that was a separation in stories that I didn't make. I'm going to make it right now. Boom, separated. There, new story. Somebody wrote and said, I've just started to have the most bizarre feeling of being grateful for the pain in my life. Oh, that is a rare sentence to read. Very few people understand what real gratitude is. Being grateful for the good things is not really gratitude. It's just common sense. That's like saying, I'm really grateful for a back rub. Gee, no kidding. Aren't you grand? Yeah. I'm really grateful when I eat butter pecan ice cream. No, that means your taste buds work and you're not dead yet. But to be grateful for pain, it means you're broadening your perspective to include much more time than just now. That's really commendable. You continue. With real love, I've gone through painful learning about myself, uncovered hidden PTSD around rejection, been absolutely horrified by how selfish I've been, finding I'm not the oh so nice person I thought I was, discovering my terror and my shame of making mistakes. It has not been a comfortable experience, but I have been given exactly what I needed in order to learn, not what I thought I wanted. You are realizing, my dear, miraculously, that all this time you've been given what you need, not just what you wanted. That's a huge problem with virtually everyone on earth, that we tend to seek what we want rather than what we need. I was watching a movie just the other day, and somebody used the quote that didn't come from original from that movie, but it's when God wants to punish us, he grants us our wishes, because almost invariably we wish for the wrong things. We wish for what we want, not what we need. You continue. I would not have learned these amazing lessons without the pain, and I'm feeling incredibly grateful. With a simple change of perspective, everything can be useful. You continue. And I had also been stuck around the law of choice for other people. I'd been hanging on to being right about what people should choose. But seeing how much I've learned from my own pain, I now realize it's absolutely crazy to think I could possibly know what would be best for other people to choose. They might get the greatest gift of learning from a choice I had thought was wrong. And with that one concept, we grow up a lot, realizing that we don't know what we think we know. If someone genuinely isn't ready for this right thing that we're certain will help them, then it's not the next right thing, is it? Well, but he'd be so much happier if he did this. And how do you know? Maybe you were, And that person may be happier if they knew it, but they may not be ready to learn it yet. And if they were forced to learn it now, it might actually hurt them, even if the principle is the right one, is a right one. Look at the circuitous route that each of us took to understanding any given thing. Other people also have their own twists and curves, which belong to them. You continue. It's just finally dawned on me that people need to choose, and I have no idea what their journey would or should look like. Bless you, honey. All I get to do, you say, is love them exactly where they are and with whatever they choose, and hope for them that they learn and find peace. And I'm going to make huge mistakes and get things very wrong in the future too. Learn some more big lessons. And that's okay too. Then you're going to have a fun life. So nice work. These are very profound realizations that most people never, ever come to. So if you want to know what real gratitude is and understanding the law of choice, back this segment up and watch it again. I did a Skype with a couple, and she started off by saying something like, he just isn't paying attention to me. He's not being loving. And she started to go on and on, just on and on about him, just blah, 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 blah. And I finally interrupted and I said, sweetie, you're being afraid. In fact, you're getting a little crazy here. So because you're afraid, you can't see what he's doing. You can't see clearly, nor can you see how you're reacting. I know you both. So I know that he's not really being different from how he usually is. You are overreacting to what he's saying and doing. She resisted. She resisted a lot and fought. And I persisted in trying to help her understand. And finally, she got it a little bit. We had a second Skype call. They got it. And here's how they did it. He just stayed available to her. He didn't tell her what she had to learn. He didn't justify what he did. He didn't try to be right. He just supported her. He was just available. He would just come in the room and check on her. As he'd go by, he would just touch her. He just let the craziness pass. Sometimes it's the only thing you can do. I've had days that were just bad days. There wasn't a thing I could do to make them go away. I just went, well, I'm going to tread water. One day, Donna just sat with me all day long. Didn't leave my side. She didn't need to explain why she wasn't leaving my side either. She just knew I was having a bad day. She just sat there. Occasionally asked me if I wanted something. Usually no. She just sat there and supported me, didn't say a thing. It passed. We don't have to analyze everything or fix everything right now. Partners stay with each other when things are difficult. Whereas in other relationships, we just take off and we hope that the other person recovers. In partnerships, we learn to adjust to each other's craziness because we all have our own forms of craziness. We all do, including you, the one who's going, no, I'm not crazy. We all do. And our craziness complements. We complement each other. We create a whole. And that's the idea, not to be like each other. That's why it's called being partners, not being clones. It's one of the most difficult adjustments in life that there is, to go from being separate to being a partner. Retaining who you are, but no longer being one person. And if that's difficult for you to understand, then you have yet to learn what partnership means, and that's fine. You've got time, maybe. I had a conversation with a couple. She said, he gets so angry And she's saying it in just this tone of voice. And when I tell him, he denies it. And then he says, similar tone of voice, he's angry, but I am not angry. She's wrong. It should have been filmed. They could have done Saturday Night Live. I know them both. She gets angry, he gets angry, but the subject of the moment, the subject that was initially brought up was his anger. So I first addressed that. You cannot address two subjects at the same time. So I explained to her how he's lived in anger for so long, from birth virtually, that he's at an anger of 5 to 6 out of 10 from the time he gets up in the morning till he goes to bed at night. He's angry all the time. And so a 5 or 6 registers to him as nothing, as 0, with a straight face, mad at a 6 out of 10. He'll say, I'm not angry. And he means it. He means it and believes it. But he's actually quite angry and comes across as angry to everybody else. He doesn't notice his anger till it reaches an 8 or more. Well, by that time, wallpaper's peeling. So if it's not an 8, he counts it as a 0. In his own words, he actually said this. Well, it's not really anger until you're screaming and throwing things. Because that's how he was raised. And he still believes it. And he believes that other people in their homes behind closed doors live that way too. In an attempt to justify himself, he smugly asked me, the expression on his face was just perfect. He said, have I been angry at you in this conversation that we've been having? And I said, yes, quite a bit. A 6 or 7. He said, I have not. And that's why you stay angry. You really don't see it. You're not pretending. So you can't admit it because you can't admit what you don't see, and you can't take steps to change it. So then he tried to change the subject. He said, well, what gives her the right to point it out? All right, well, let's go with changing the subject for a second. Because your partner's is why. And because you are angry, and because it is killing you, and because she sees it better than you do. And if she doesn't point it out to you, who will? You don't see it. I'm not there when you're angry, except in this conversation. So who's left? Her. And if you don't listen to her and believe her, you're going to spend the rest of your life saying you're not angry while you set the forest on fire everywhere you go. That's what gives her the right. I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again because I said it to them. In a relationship, there can't be any anger. I can't count how many times people have said, well, I wasn't that mad. That's like, I didn't hit you in the head with my sledgehammer very hard. You're kidding. No, there can't be any. Those of you who are curious, by the way, just get a friend and ask them to hit you in the head with a sledgehammer lightly, and then you let me know if a little anger is okay. A lady said to me, I've been trying to do real love right. I realize that I'm trying to make you, meaning me, this was in an email, but I'm trying to make you love me. Then I reasoned that if I'm squeaky clean and perfect enough, then you can't not love me. You have to love me. That's what I've done in the past. Now that I'm seeing it, I don't have to do it as much. Now, this is more brilliant than you might know. Because what she's saying is she doesn't have to do it as much simply because she can see it. She doesn't have to beat herself up. She doesn't have to notice she didn't make a promise. I'm not going to do this again. She didn't say, I feel so guilty. There's no role for any of that. She just is aware. So now it's not, I won't do it as much. I don't have to do it as much. Oh, that's very beautifully said. If you didn't get that, again, back, rewind, go through this section again. A woman wrote and said, I don't want to tell you this, which means, of course, either you've done something that you know is wrong or you're thinking about doing something that's wrong. You said, I've listened to you talk many times about the dangers of romance, and I find myself still thinking like a teenager sometimes. I got a card from an ex-boyfriend who's going on an exotic vacation in a couple of months, and he's invited me. Yeah, well, you're right. That would make you a teenage fool. You said, when we met 20 years ago, it was love at first sight on both sides. I'm trying to think of a time that love at first sight continued as the real thing. And when I think of that example, I'll get back to you. That kind of love almost always continues to be distracting. Even, in fact, especially when people get together after 20 years, because they expect to find the same degree of romance and it just ain't there. At this point in your life, it would make sense for you to remember the potential distraction of this. And you're clever to say, because notice you said, it was love at first sight on both sides. Clever of you to say both sides, as though somehow that made a difference. You're trying to convince me that it's a good thing because, of course, you both had the same idea. So I guess if we both have the same, the idea to jump off a cliff at the same time, it becomes a better thing. You continue. When we fell in love, he was married. 10 years later, we were both divorced. We dated for 3 years, but living 3 hours apart and each with kids and working long hours and late visits and late night driving, we probably didn't get beyond the honeymoon phase. What we did do was talk late and long most nights, and I think we were genuinely interested in each other's interests. More clever persuasion. I'm sure you shared interests, but at that point in your life, what are the odds that you would really have known what it meant to care about him unconditionally? Bank robbers share interests, but that doesn't make for a healthy relationship. So this idea of sharing interests is such a fallacy, and it's what pretty much every dating website is based on. You said, I ended it as I felt he was passive and victim-y and he'd never be capable of loving my children. We left each other and got on with our lives and hadn't been in touch for years. But yeah, I kind of want to go on this vacation with him. And yeah, moderately insane of you. You said, you and I have established that I'm a long way from being ready for a relationship. I have no interest I have no interest in a relationship with him, which makes me wonder why you'd be going on vacation with him. But I'm sure you're going to explain that to me in a minute. If I'd not told you about this, what would have happened? I would have gone to visit in 2 weeks, and what for? The romantic nostalgia, the sex, the great food in a beautiful city, the reminder of being special to somebody, even though it's pure imitation, I grant. Then he'd go back to his life and I to mine, a weekend of pain relief, supposedly harmless, a deliberate decision to have a weekend of imitation. If he is indeed single, would it really be all that bad? It's very persuasive reasoning. You realize that it's imitation. You're just going to go and have a weekend of pain relief, so what could be wrong with that? Pretty good reasoning, except that every single addict on earth reasons exactly as you just did, no matter what the addiction is. Word for word almost. Would it be so bad, says every alcoholic, drug addict, sex addict, gambling addict, blah, 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 to have just one more pain relief with drugs, sex, alcohol, whatever? Every addict does this. When I went into drug treatment, finally, after how many years of being an addict, I shot up everything that I had in the car before I walked in the front door of the treatment center. I could barely walk in. This is what addicts do. And you continue. And I subscribed to no sex for about a year into a relationship, and I see that it would be distracting, as you say, but I believe that we could do the vacation without sex. So does every addict. Every addict says, I'm going to go out with my drinking buddies, but I won't drink. I was an addict for far too long not to laugh at this reasoning, because I've heard all these things, word for word. We say it wouldn't matter, but you'd still be getting lots of other forms of addiction satisfied, even if you didn't have sex. You continue. You will be laughing and shaking your head about now. Well, yes, you're right. I hate to be that predictable, but I think I would actually do this, especially now that you know, but that may not be the main issue. Analgesia is analgesia. Analgesia is analgesia. Analgesia, by the way, just simply means no pain, with or without sex. And he and I did that for years. So now you hear how you're going back and forth. I'm going, no, yes, no. What's the harm? I can see that it's a problem. You're hearing this, right? You continue. I have a sinking feeling about the love and teaching that's about to come from you, but thanks in advance. Tell me, convince me why choosing a dose of imitation love for a weekend would be so bad for me. Nah, I'm not going to convince you of anything. In fact, your requiring that I convince you is screaming that you're not trusting right now. And I don't need you to. You may need to go do this just to learn again that it doesn't work any better now than it did 20 years ago. I don't know. You said, I'll be using him, he'll be using me, pleasure, escape, consensual, and humor me. Let's assume that there will be no sex, which I do think is hysterical, but it's okay. We'll assume that. I get that you're taking on the pretty thankless task of loving and teaching me through my addiction, and I might be willfully undoing your efforts. You mentioned purity to me once in a reply, and that comes to mind now, as does integrity. If as you're doing this reasoning, the words purity and integrity come to your mind, you might let them stay there instead of just pushing them out of your mind. All of that. So either listen and trust or don't. I'm not going to convince you. You've been choosing not to listen for a lifetime. If you use like an addict now, exactly when will be a better time to trust? There will always be another occasion to use an analgesic. The longer we become sober, the purer, to use your word, we become, and better able to feel inspiration and to know what the right thing is to do. She wrote the very next day. She said, I could have said everything in 3 sentences instead of 50. She said, 1, I've used men as a source of imitation love, and when it has inevitably ended, I've indulged in victimhood about how they handled the breakup. 2, I'm single now solely because I'm incapable of loving another person unconditionally. And 3, rather than learning how to be loving, I've continued to indulge my addiction to attention and trading, distracting myself with fixes of pain relief rather than truly growing. Yeah, those are 3 pretty good sentences, and you could have said it just like that. If that's not enough motivation to help you make your decision, I got nothing to convince you with. Here's somebody else who says, when we say telling the truth about ourselves, I think it's not just about our mistakes, our flaws, our getting and protecting behaviors, but also about the factual truths about us. Is that right? So both Jorge, I'm making this name up, I think, sometimes I can't remember later whether that was the real name or the one I made up. Jorge and I have had a really hard time telling people that we had an arranged marriage, for example. We say we met through friends in common, but that's not the truth. I hate saying it each time. It feels like a lie. It's a little bit closer to the truth to say that we met through our church, but Jorge doesn't like saying that anymore because he doesn't want people to think he was ever even in a church in his life. People always ask us this because, I'm not from this country and they wonder how we got together. So I'd like to know what you think about it. Yeah, telling the truth about ourselves does also involve saying factual things. The purpose of telling the truth is so that we feel loved and feel connected to people. You and Jorge have, or at least have had, some judgment or shame about having an arranged marriage. When you get it, that it's just part of your history, that it doesn't say anything about your worth, then you won't be uncomfortable sharing that with anybody. You'll find people who will have a judgment about it and those who don't. But in the meantime, you still get to decide who to tell the truth to. If you just plain feel uncomfortable in telling people the truth for any reason, you don't have to come up with a good one. Tell them what you want. Part of the truth, a little of the truth, none of the truth. Make a story up in a far distant land in a beautiful castle. Who cares? It's none of their business. Here's somebody who says, I work all the time, all day, every day of the week. My boss likes it that he can depend on me, and I like feeling valuable. I feel like I'm on drugs, so I must be in my addiction. I suppose safety. Yeah, and power and value. Everything in me is crying out for some fun or lightness or connection or affection, and I realize I don't know how to do any of that without drinking. I do know I need a break from my own mind and working. I happen to know that, because I know you, that you live in a community where you could meet personally with any number of real love people who would adore seeing you. I know that for a fact. So access isn't the problem. You are addicted to work and avoidance and safety, and you're afraid of people seeing who you are. You continue. A real love person recently said that I'm lonely, and if I don't start connecting with people who can see me, I could very well be drinking again in no time. And at this rate, in regards to work, I'll burn out. You think? You're clinging to the edge of survival by your fingernails, kid. That can't last long. You've got to connect with somebody, or you'll stay in addiction. Already addicted to work. And then you start adding drinking and who knows what else, and then the addictions become unsupportable. You say, my real love friend said that I'm hard to see because I hide out in the open and I say all the right words. Crap, she's right. She is right. You're sneaky. You pretend well. You have a gorgeous smile that hides your pain. And your addiction is to work, which of course is socially commendable. I could come, but I have to be at work that day. Oh, whoever argues with you, oh, well, you're so responsible. No, in this case, you're just running. And you're still not happy. It's up to you, but any addiction kills. And work kills us emotionally just as surely as cocaine kills physically. You say, I guess I just don't know what to say to people. Oh, that's crap, kid. Tell them what you just told me. It's not a mystery here. Just say what's on your mind. Don't think about it. Especially in real love, just tell them everything you just said. And friends don't really need content anyway. Tell them you're alone. Tell them you're addicted. Tell them you're thinking of drinking. You're going to discover support all over the place, but not unless you connect with people. You continue. It really is like after a certain amount of time knowing somebody, I feel more and more hidden. I don't know how to be real, like I've used up my allotted time for being afraid or something. I don't know. What do you think? No, you feel like you've used up your allotted time to be worth breathing. And you still think you have to perform to be accepted. Even in real love, once you've told the truth, then you would reason without thinking of it consciously, well, after I've told the truth, then what? Then you think you have to perform with that too. Wrong. You're just addicted. You've been trained to perform. You say, I'm not letting people in. Where do I find people who can see me? I do know I don't want to be lonely anymore. And the truth is, I really am right now, very. See the problem here? Like you thought I didn't see that already and everybody else doesn't? You have lots of people to see you. You're just afraid to let them. You've been avoiding me for months and everybody else for quite a while. Make a commitment to do something. You say, I don't want to be lonely anymore. Prove it. Because your behavior shows that you're really kind of enjoying it. You don't want to take any risks. Make a commitment in writing. Write it down right now who you're going to contact. 5 people in the next 5 days. And then do it. And then make another commitment. Or don't. But your life's at stake. She wrote a second email. I really am sneaky. She said, you were actually seeing that I'm sneaky? Like it was really subtle. For some reason, that feels good to me. I'm so sneaky that I even believe my own lies that I'm okay when I'm not. So do most people. Every addict does it. Having all the right real love words or any truth words can be a curse for someone like me because I use them to look like I'm doing my work. You said, my life is at stake here. I believe you. How does that happen so quickly? Because we begin to neglect our spiritual and emotional nourishment. Once things are okay, if all we've ever known is survival, then once we're not in pain, we go right back to our old behaviors. It's not enough to survive. In fact, in the Real Love and PTSD book, I talk about that surviving and thriving are actually mutually incompatible. If you're in a mindset of surviving, you will do whatever it takes to protect yourself. That's not a way that you can actually live. Surviving and living aren't the same. Here's somebody who says, my father is not responsible with managing his money. He invests poorly. He loans people money who don't pay him back, stuff like that. I've tried to talk to him, but he doesn't listen. What can I do? Well, it's his money. You didn't mention that he was, mentally impaired. You've talked to him about it. You could make additional recommendations, but it doesn't sound like he really wants them. So leave him alone. And if he blows it all, well, he earned it. It's his to blow. But let it go, kid. It's making you unhappy to fuss about it. Here's somebody who says, I'm dating a woman who read the Real Love and Marriage Vows and said that she had that kind of partnership with a man who died of cancer, although they were not married. She says she can be an even better partner from what she learned from him and possibly from real love, and is open to learning with me. But she says she doesn't want to marry. She didn't marry her first partner. She doesn't want to marry this time. Is that a deal breaker? Because she's pretty attached to her position. Depends on you, huh? For one thing, if she genuinely feels loved unconditionally for the first time, would she change her mind about being married? I don't know. Do you want to find out? Again, up to you. I can't tell you whether being married is a deal breaker or not. But A, she might change her mind. You could explore that possibility. But if you're pretty attached to wanting marriage, then you pretty much have to tell her that up front. And if she doesn't change her mind soon, then you end it soon. How many people have continued to live together like forever, despite both of them having a deal breaker on the part of the other one? I was talking to a couple recently, in fact, and they were just going on and on and on and on and on and on, describing their ups and downs and reading each other's, talking about how they had to read each other's minds and how they were failing and how their partner was failing to read their minds and how they'd succeed for a little while, and how just earlier in that day that they'd talked for 2.5 hours going up and down, and they talked about their moods and withdrawing and criticizing. And after a while, I was looking at my clock and at my watch at how long each of them was taking. And after about 20 minutes of this, I don't know what possessed me to let this go on for 20 minutes. I said, you realize you could have avoided all of this with 3 sentences. Since I've never really said these 3 sentences quite like this before, I'm going to emphasize them to you. Rather than go on and on with all these expectations and all this disappointment and annoyance and everything, Each of you says to the other, here's what I want. Not here's what you have to give me. Here's what I want. So that way there's no mind reading. There's no confusion. There's no criticizing. There's no demanding. Here's what I want. Here's what I have to give. No confusion, no mind reading. Freely offered gift. You both say this. Here's what I want. Here's what I have to give. And you both say, what do you need? Which communicates unconditional loving. What you learn what you could give as a gift based on the second sentence, which is, here's what I have. You can go back and forth with these. Notice, here's what I want. Here's what I have. What do you need? You can go back and forth with those for quite a while. There's no criticism or expectations or anger or confusion or fear or anything. And if you do that, you'll end up getting most of what you certainly need. You may not get everything you want, but we talked about that earlier, didn't we? What we want is very often exactly what we don't need. I just suggest those 3 sentences as kind of a guideline for discussions amongst partners. So throughout our discussion, throughout our video chat, we've seen examples of where people have benefited from or would benefit from finding love, trusting it, remembering it, learning it to share it with others, and as they have done so, or if they will, the results are predictable. We're always happier when we follow the laws of happiness. We'll see you in a week.